Namaskar. Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. Apologies for the slight delayed start. We had a couple of guests and we needed to make sure that everybody's audio and video was working fine. And now I have the pleasure of inviting Se Hoon Kim and Utsav Chakrabarti on what happened today. Se Hoon, Utsav, Namaskar and welcome to PGurus channel. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having us.
Namaste, Sree.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. It's late at night there, and today was a very busy day for all of you. There was a plethora of meetings. Modi was meeting. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, and everything had a slow story and a context with it. And we're going to go over a lot of these things, viewers. You probably saw snippets here and there. Somebody coming, somebody making. That's all the sugary stuff. This is going to be not just takeaways for India, but also giveaways from India. So understand that part, viewers. This is a balanced look because Se Hoon has been there for a long time in these meetings, and Utsav was there for some parts of the meetings, and so between them, they're going to give us their wisdom on how they saw this whole day. I'm going to start with you, Se Hoon. So you were in both meetings. Tell us a little bit about the macro, like the two big meetings. What happened at White House meeting, where Trump and Modi jointly addressed journalists, and what happened in the private meeting that happened afterwards. Take it away. Over to you.
So thank you so much for having us here. And again, it's always an honor to speak on this channel. So I think it's imperative that we make it clear, make one point clear that this visit was extremely significant for a couple of reasons. So number one, we have this new bilateral relations between the US and India, and some of the most major key points were outlined. Everything that ranges from security to trade, cultural relations, and even some of the most sensitive things that quite frankly weren't possible to resolve under the Biden administration. So things like the extradition of criminals, right, which actually was discussed by Trump, that he's open to doing a lot more in the future. And from what we can tell, he actually recognized that the Khotestanis terrorism is actually a real threat to the United States and really to everywhere that it exists there. But the other key thing to notice with this entire visit was that in terms of Bangladesh, or in terms of how the U.S. views India's regional dominance in that part of the world, Modi recognized the important role that India can play and must play in order to maintain peace and stability. And so that's why when one of the journalists asked him about Bangladesh, namely naming things like, and things like the meeting between Muhammad Yunus and Alex Soros, and the regime change that happened last year, where so many unfortunate things happened afterwards, like the persecution of Hindus, Christians, and Buddhists, and everyone there. Trump said something very, very clear, and which I think resonates, and to me it was basically a shot heard around the world, where he said, where he basically said, to summarize, Prime Minister Modi knows this much better than I do, and I'm just going to let him handle it. So what does that mean? It shows, at least to many of us, that Trump recognizes the ability of Prime Minister Modi and really all of India to take care of their own neighborhood, right? And then this is quite significant also, because it can serve as a great catalyst for our allies all over the world. And really, that's just the gist of it. And I can even add the fact that there's going to be more innovative deals between the two countries, like India stepping up actually in terms of its game in the AI world. But also at the same time, there were talks of increased military cooperation, and even talks of selling weaponry, and at the same token aircrafts that could help both sides in securing their airspaces and whatnot. So all of that was discussed, and it was truly incredible to be there today.
Wonderful, Se Hoon, and we'll come back to you in just one moment. I would like to now invite Utsav Chakrabarti. Utsav, you had a lot of fun today. You were there. You were watching all the things in and around. And I just want to play a small slide deck that I got from some people who were witnesses to what is happening there. Viewers, we have done a lot of work in trying to make sure that PGurus would give you the things that others perhaps are not looking at. For example, I'm going to share a slide deck with you, and I'm sure Utsav, you might have heard what happened, because these are all visuals. Just take a look at it and let us know, because viewers, some of you might be thinking, why is PGurus taking aim at some specific individuals who are spies for the ISI, who've been caught spying in the United States, who've been sent to jail in the United States, who have spent time in the United States, and then look what they are doing today. That's what we are going to show just now. Utsav, thank you so much. I'm going to just bring up a slide deck here. Take a look at this and tell me. So this was the Modi's visit to White House today, February the 13th, 2025. Who is this guy? Why?
So it's very interesting that you bring up this photograph. We also in Hindu Action, we received it from some of the people, including some of our volunteers who were there. The interesting thing about this picture is that Ghulam Nabi Pai is a well-known Pakistani asset in America. He's one of the few people in America who went to jail for being an ISI agent back in 2011. And it is interesting that he continues to engage in Pakistan's agenda in Washington, D.C. so openly and so blatantly. I guess he's just doesn't care. And I guess the Pakistanis don't care either. So he was, from what I heard, he was bringing in flags and standing and, encouraging people to come and join the Khotestani protesters who were standing in front of the White House screaming, obscene language stuff about Hindus, about Indians, about Modi, about Trump and Modi together. So it was quite, I don't know, I guess Pakistanis are just desperate at this point. But it tells us two things. It tells us, first thing is that no matter what, Pakistan, no matter how down they are and out they are, they will latch on to anything and everything that can, give India or Hindus a bad name. And that includes the Khalistan movement. They have been promoting that movement from the 70s, from 𝗤𝗓𝗄𝗏 Operation Tupac 1, and it continues. And the second most important thing that we should carry from this photograph is that the Khalistanis themselves cannot seem to divorce themselves, no matter how much support they get from Justin Trudeau in Canada, no matter how much support they get from the American government. At least the Biden administration was quite sympathetic towards them. No matter how much support they get, they continue to act and work for their Pakistani counterparts. Please excuse me, my daughter is standing right next to me and is trying to say hello to me at the same time.
Hello to you. So viewers, any of you have even iota of doubt that no, Khalistanis is the proud sixth movement, please, this is proof for you. This is proof for you. It doesn't get more, like a gold standard for proof. This is a guy who has been convicted of being a spy, as doing spying for ISI in America, and look what he's carrying around. I mean, I don't know why, these are the crowds that were collecting. This is the one side where the Khalistanis were protesting. There was a huge crowd on the other side where the Hindus, especially Hindus from Bangladesh, as well as Hindus from India, in fact, some Muslims from Bangladesh also, I'm hearing, Utsav. I don't know. I was not there. Talk to us a little bit about it. Yeah,
I would say more than 50% of the people in the crowds that were in support of India were Muslims from Bangladesh, and that was very surprising. That could that what I gathered from this is that the people in Bangladesh are hurting, and they were really there in big numbers. I mean, there were a huge number of Hindus. There were at least 400 Hindus there from the Bangladeshi community. And at least another 150 Muslims from the Bangladeshi community, and they were actually taking on the Khalistanis who were screaming and abusing everybody who was in front of them. But one thing I want to further add about this Khalistani setup is that the Khalistanis really, when they are talking and hanging out with Ghulam Nabi Pai, they should realize that they should actually ask for Khalistan from Pai, because 94% of what they claim to be Khalistan, which is Maharaja Ranjit Singh's empire, the Sikh empire, 94% of the land actually is in Pakistan. So it is mind-boggling that these Khalistanis have no reason, or no way to ask this from the Pakistanis. But then again, they are actually working for them. So they need to be taken on their face value as it is.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much. And now let's get back to Se Hoon. So sorry, I was trying to do two things at the same time. Thank you so much, Utsav. I was doing two things at the same time, and I was trying to get something from the other computer. I have a couple of videos to share with you viewers. Now, Se Hoon, tell me something. There was a second meeting that took place allegedly at the Blair House, where Prime Minister Modi had a freewheeling discussion, question and answer session for journalists, whoever was able to make it to that meeting. Talk to us a little bit about what else got discussed. Bangladesh is a big one, but we're going to come back to that and say, if India is going to look at and take care of Bangladesh, what does it really mean on the ground? That's something that, so please get ready with your answer on that one. What does it mean on the ground? Yeah, okay, so there will be no interference from United States. That's good. But beyond that, what is India's role going to be? See, this is where the big brother, the gentle big brother, see, sometimes the big brother can also be a little bit, coming down hard. Look, I took all the hits growing up. Now you listen to me, younger brother, whatever that is. So I just leave it to you to formulate the answer. Se Hoon, tell us a little bit about what happened in that second meeting, please.
So I have to be honest, I wasn't there either, but as were a lot of, probably vast majority of the journalists that were in the big room that we've seen on the TV screen. But one thing is very clear is that the same things, pretty much the same things were all discussed in every event. So even the question of Bangladesh, came up in some way, shape, or form in every single one of those meetings. But one thing that does come to mind is the fact that there were talks of tariffs coming against India by the United States. Now, again, we can see this from a distance and say, well, that looks like a negative thing for India. It even looks like a power move by Trump to pretty much scare India into following the will of the U.S. How is this different than that of the Biden administration, who wanted to do the same exact thing? Well, firstly, that's hold on a second. Let's think and just take a breather here. And I say this because it's really not that. And the reason is because President Trump, and I was there in the East Wing when he made this announcement, that he made it clear that at this point, because U.S. and India relations is so strong, there needs to be a balancing balancing establishment of friendship between the both countries, where they can equally and fairly trade with each other. And again, yes, from the U.S.'s side, a lot of things have happened in terms of trade that wasn't fair towards the U.S.'s side, from the perspective that Trump has given out today. And I think to a point, Prime Minister Modi have come up with a solution. And by the way, President Trump actually complimented Prime Minister Modi, saying that this is a great deal maker. That he is actually a tough deal maker, and this is someone that I can vouch for to the rest of the world. Right? I mean, he pretty much said that to all of us in the room, and that told us that at this point, whether it was the tariffs or even the BRICS, for example, both President Trump and Prime Minister Modi understood that U.S.-India relations has to stay firm and strong in order for both countries to survive, but also for regional security and pretty much prosperity for both sides. Because again, you have to remember, India is now becoming a main hub, or I would even call it an incoming mecca for all AI technology, right, in the world, right? NVIDIA has located a huge, or is planning to locate a huge portion of their activities into India. And so are many other microchip or even AI companies as well. And so those are some of the things that were discussed. But also at the same time, I think at this point, in the grand scheme of things, we can also say that there's now a new vision between the U.S. and India as to how we will carry things forward. Meaning that for example, under the Biden administration, it was really about keeping India contained so that it can't become, number one, an example to other countries that, hey, you can actually break away from the U.S. establishment, or what we call as a deep state, right? But also, number two, under the Biden administration, it was really all about making India into another subservient state, for like any other regimes that unfortunately the U.S. was responsible in changing. I will not name which countries here, but we have moved from that to now saying we're both mutual partners. We could definitely benefit from each other, and because of that, and President Trump even said, I am going to extradite some bad people that India was looking for all this while back to you, and more will be coming. And this will be a sign of our trust. And we need to work together because it's quite simply imperative. And for the sake of the world, we need to make this happen. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Se Hoon and Utsav. So Trump says, Modi, you take care of Bangladesh. One line. And now this is going to essentially, it's going to blow up the internet in India and Bangladesh today, especially in Bangladesh, because here they are thinking that they were going to get this, that, this, and all that stuff. Now is that bring them down to the earth. Reality has finally struck. So in terms of being the big brother, the more responsible brother, how do you foresee this in the next few weeks? What's going to be happening in Bangladesh?
So there are, the current administration in Bangladesh, or the regime in Bangladesh, I shouldn't even say it's an administration, the current regime in Bangladesh continues to be illegal in many ways, according to Bangladesh's constitution. The Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who was removed from power by force, actually never resigned. So if you look at a technicality, Bangladesh still doesn't have a prime minister. And the prime minister is in exile, and so a couple of things should be derived out of this. Number one is that Biden is publicly and quite forcefully disowning the actions of the previous administration and the agencies that were involved in doing the regime change in Bangladesh. He either doesn't want to talk about it, or he says that he has no further interest in that issue. And when he gives India the responsibility of the region, it essentially gives India a message that now you need to do what needs to be done. And you, as a nation of 1.4 billion people with an ocean named after you, and being a 4,000-year-old civilization, need to wear the big boy pants and do what needs to be done. Now, what does that mean? That essentially means that India needs to develop its security apparatus to ensure that there is no infiltration from Bangladesh and there is no security threat from proxy actors from Bangladesh. Because you have to understand that Bangladesh has been a Pakistani proxy whenever Islamists came to power in Bangladesh, and they were using those proxies to destabilize the entire northeastern region of India quite actively. And they have successfully done that in the past, in the 1980s and 90s. So India needs to be prepared for similar activities. And then India needs to now wonder whether the minorities in Bangladesh, which are nearly 8% of the population now, can be protected. And how can they be protected? Because Bangladesh has been losing its minorities almost every 14 years, 15 years, their minority becomes half of what it was. So it's a 15-year cycle before it becomes half of the previous percentage. And that is unsustainable. Within another 25, 30 years, Bangladesh will be having no minorities, no Hindus. So, and that's a civilizational region where Hindus have lived for the last 4,000 years. So there has to be real pragmatic steps that need to be taken. There has to be multilateral support for it. And there has to be unilateral action from India if needed to ensure that the Hindus in Bangladesh are stabilized. What that means could be any number of things. The other thing that also India needs to look at is whether it will allow the current Yunus regime to continue to give so much power and credence to the madrasa-trained radical Islamists. And how that is reversed, I think India has to figure it out. But in all of this, I do see that Bangladesh is in for a very tough time. The current administration, the current regime has been targeting not just the Hindus, but also all the previous supporters of Awami League, who are huge in numbers in their country. They are at this point probably 30% of the population. So they have been persecuting these people as well. And it is just a matter of time before these people rise up and say we cannot take enough of this, and they will fight back, and they will fight back physically. And that is going to lead to violence in Bangladesh. So I think India needs to factor in all of these things. India needs to prepare for all of these things. And then let's see where the chips fall.
Thank you so much, Utsav. And Se Hoon, I have a question for you. For Mr. Muhammad Yunus, there are two doors. One door, if he opens it, is a plane waiting to take him to Dubai. Another door, if he opens, there's a plane waiting to take him to Singapore. Now, which door do you think he's going to open, and why?
Well, before I answer that question, I think if it gets really worse, I don't know if there's going to be any doors for him to open at all. And the reason is because there are increasing number of reports coming out from the grassroots of Bangladesh, where people are simply coming out and saying, "Look, this was a mistake. This is not what we had expected. Our homes are burning down. Job situation is not increasing. Getting better. Bangladesh, honestly, it's becoming a lot more closer to Pakistan. So many analysts are saying that the name Bangladesh still exists, but its political structure, social influence has completely turned towards Pakistan, and in a way, what we know is the East Pakistan has sort of revived out of the ashes. And so I don't know if the people in Bangladesh can actually take that. I mean, again, you have to remember, you have a whole generation who still were educated about the bravery of the Mukti that fought against the genocidal Pakistani army that came to kill all Bengalis just because they were Bengalis, right? They were kafirs, right? Because they wouldn't submit themselves completely to speaking Urdu, right? Among other things. And so they have that. And I see that. And also just to add on to what Utsav was saying, on top of the hardship that the Bangladeshi people will unfortunately face, there is now a brewing of anger that is getting to a point of no return. So I think Yunus will probably face that justice in the future. I don't know how much support his Jamaati or other BNP supporters will give him, because he does have he did infiltrate within the BNP, although I don't think he's completely in control of it. But let's also look back and see what language both President Trump and Prime Minister Modi used today in the East Wing. President Trump made it clear today in front of the world that combating Islamist threat is on the agenda, right? And this is something that that President Trump himself has said. Actually, one of the first things that he said once he walked into the room as part of his introductory speech, right? So what does that mean? He recognizes that this is a problem that is affecting everybody, including, and we saw today, Muslims from Bangladesh, right, who are saying, we're becoming victims of this still, right? And so, and with the extradition of the terrorist Rana and among other people in the future, I think what's probably going to happen is that, Yunus is probably starting to, I mean, if he's really intelligent, he's probably going to realize that the hand that kept on feeding him freely without any consequences have now been taken away, and it's replaced with a hand that has basically told him to stop. We will no longer feed you, and you will have to pay for all the damages, for all the injustice that you have caused in your land. I mean, that's exactly what happened today, right? I mean, and some are already criticizing President Trump by saying that, well, look, he he's just throwing Bangladesh, out, off the table because he doesn't want to deal with it. Well, that may be so in some perspective, but on a grander scheme of things, as I said before, he understands that India is more than capable of stabilizing the region, and also at the same time becoming a catalyst for every other country, that they can actually take care of their own backyards and their neighborhoods as well. And so with all of that in mind, if he's lucky to run away to Dubai or Singapore, I guess he'll probably be the luckiest man alive. But I really don't think that the precedence that he has set against Sheikh Hasina is going to go away. And by the way, let me just conclude by saying this: he has created such an aura of hatred and against foreign Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, that it's actually going to backfire on him, where everything that he and his circle have said against her and the Awami League, and although they were not perfect themselves, it's gonna come back and bite them in the hand, and I don't think they will be able to survive it. I mean, the people of Bangladesh will probably put them into justice in some way, shape, or form.
Thank you so much, Se Hoon. Now, question to you, Utsav. You said that Modi has, pretty much carte blanche powers to take care of Bangladesh. Now, India stepped in when Sri Lanka was getting into a huge mess, and they've managed to stabilize it. And for that, whether you like it or not, they found a guy called Ranil Wickremesinghe, who was willing to work with India. And he did that interim period where the stability sort of happened. India even underwrote some of the loans that IMF was giving to Sri Lanka, saying that we stand behind these loans, go ahead and do it. Now, in the case of Bangladesh, I'm not so sure that this thing can be used, this formula can be used in Bangladesh, number one. Number two, is there a Ranil Wickremesinghe for Bangladesh? Because I also don't think Sheikh Hasina would be the right solution to go back and say, okay, you go back, we're going to restore this whole pottery barn store, everything is fine now. I don't think that's an option either. This is personally my opinion. So how do you see that part? Because will India use something similar to what they did to Sri Lanka to stabilize the Bangladesh economy?
I still think that Sheikh Hasina has a future in Bangladesh, for the simple reason that when you look at the people in Bangladesh, at this point of time, they feel cheated. They feel that this whole quote unquote student revolution, or whatever monsoon spring, the spring words that they keep using everywhere in the world, the monsoon spring was actually a pretty wet dream that didn't materialize. And so as with most monsoons, it was wet and it didn't materialize. So I think Sheikh Hasina has a future, and Yunus knows that. Now, whether it's going to be a long future, whether it's going to be an interim future where then new leaders come up and then take over the responsibility, no matter what, I think there needs to be a serious and a mature government in Bangladesh. Bangladesh is strategically too important a place to be left in the hands of Taliban-like elements. And more importantly, what needs to be understood is that, and I'm sure President Trump and the American leadership now understands that, and we will also try to explain this, that when the Biden administration was trying to do the regime change and putting, quote unquote, their proxies in power, even the Islamist ones, they felt that they could control them, like they felt in many other places. What they didn't realize is that these Islamists are Jamaat-e-Islami people. Their ideological alliance is always with Pakistan. And wherever there is Pakistan, there is China. So the friends of America under Biden administration actually turned out to be friends of Pakistan, who are also friends of China. So even if the Biden administration thought that it was buying these people in the new regime, they were not buying anything. They were just helping Pakistan give China a backdoor into Bangladesh. And I'm sure the Biden administration didn't realize it, but the Trump administration does realize it. So in everybody's interest, it is important that Bangladesh be brought back to a more mature government. But more importantly, it is important to address the issue of religious minorities in Bangladesh. How we should address that is a question. In America, people can look at the Kosovo model And the Kosovo model is where, there is an autonomous zone where the law and order is in the hands of, internationally monitored bodies, and security is ensured. We don't know, but it's, these are all things that need to be looked at, and that's, I'm sure people in India and people in Bangladesh eventually are mature enough to figure out what needs to be done and going forward. One thing I also wanted to bring about, Sree, in terms of the conversation that you were discussing previously, is that the issue of immigration and the issue of defense purchases was very important in the conversations. And one thing that I think both parties agreed is that no one likes illegal immigration. So there was this whole hoopla in India where a lot of opposition leaders were making a huge deal out of the fact that there were, people from India who were illegally in America who were sent back in handcuffs and so on and so forth. And somehow, see, it is important for all respectable nations to have borders that are safe, and that all illegal immigration needs to stop. It leads to human trafficking, and I think that became a part of the conversation. When that conversation happens, I think the issue of Khalistanis and Khalistanis exploiting young people from Punjab who come here illegally to force them to, support their movement in return for legal status is something that was, I'm sure, discussed. And I think that is also good for the strategic relations between the two countries in the long run.
Thank you so much. So last question to you, Se Hoon. I don't know if you've been following the news, but Pakistan has broken the ceasefire with India. This has been in place for about 3.5, 4 years, almost 4 years, and they've broken the ceasefire. A lot of firing along Jammu international border. Was there any mention of Pakistan in these two meetings, and anything that was discussed there? Any idea?
As far as the ones that I have participated, no, Pakistan wasn't even mentioned. And if you're wondering why, well, my assumption is that, they've come to a point where they've understand that Pakistan will always be just Pakistan, meaning they will do what they will do, but it will come to absolutely no fruition whatsoever. And another point that we could also look at is that maybe they're reaching a point of desperation. And again, President Trump, even back in 2016, had publicly acknowledged that Pakistan has a problem with spreading in using terrorism as a means of its survival, and that it needs to stop. And so, although, and here's another thing: the Trump administration has a tendency to mention one thing publicly, but also already be working on something behind the scenes already. So it wouldn't surprise me if something comes up about Pakistan in the upcoming few weeks or even months. Probably it won't fare well to their favor. It has happened before in the previous administration. And so with the strategic partnership building up between US and India, Pakistan's only going to be isolating themselves. And by the way, they're essentially a vassal state of China, and so you have to also wonder if their decisions are entirely of their own, or is it of China's that is being used to undermine India. The only country that really does not want really are angry about this visit, but really can't do anything about it, is China, because they know that India is the only country that's blocking the floodgates against the US from happening within the BRICS system. And also, India is the only middle ground country in the world where a country like Russia and the United States can find a common ground to simply talk as well. So again, just going back to Pakistan in that sense is becoming extremely irrelevant. And so this is probably one of their ways where a child is throwing a tantrum for attention. Either it's going to come to absolutely nothing, or it's going to result into them pretty much regretting their decision. Like always.
Thank you so much, Se Hoon. Thank you so much. Utsav, last thoughts. Basically, what I would like you to touch upon is some deals in defense, some deals the reciprocity tariffs, reciprocal tariffs that could bite some product ranges in India. And overall, you think this was a good visit? Could have been better? Your thoughts on that?
So there are two aspects to it. There is the optics, and then there is the the place where the rubber meets the road. When
Right.
it comes to the optics, I think this was a very, very positive visit. The fact that he was put up in the Blair House and not at the 𝗲𝗏𝗏 Intercontinental, which is a hotel right next to the White House. His previous visits, including the one where he addressed the US Congress under Biden, he was staying at the 𝗲𝗏𝗏 Intercontinental. So staying at a hotel is a lesser grade guest. Staying at your own residence, the Blair House is a residence that's across the street from the White House and is considered part of the guest residence for the president himself. So when somebody stays at Blair House, it's a higher, just like in any other society and civilization, when the person who is visiting is brought into your house right away, he's a bigger guest than the person staying at a hotel and coming and having dinner with you. So the fact that he was at the Blair House, Prime Minister Modi was at the Blair House and not at a hotel, is a very positive optics. The fact that the two of them, they intermingled quite positively. There was quite a bit of anticipation about their friendship. They kept it up. Elon met, Vivek Ramaswamy met, 𝗠𝗢𝗙 𝗍𝗏𝗏 met. So literally every American Hindu leader of any stature in American politics, especially on the Republican side, met with Prime Minister Modi. And that was a very positive optics. Now, the real place where the rubber meets the road does not show up right now, because right now it's it's like all the good things are visible. The real place where the rubber meets the road will be 2-3 months down the road. And that's where we will see whether the discussions that happened today or even yesterday amongst different leadership people in America and India or from India, how they fructify, how are they implemented. So we have to take for granted that India will face tariffs. The reason is that India itself provides, gives tariffs to other countries. So whatever India does, America will reciprocate. There is no doubt about it, and that's why both Modi ji and President Trump kept highlighting the fact that both are, one is India first, one is America first. So they have to learn to agree to disagree on that one, and that's a cordial way to start the conversation. When it comes to the defense deals, I don't know what the conversations were, but I do see that President Trump offered F-35. What I would have really hoped actually happens is that America clears the backlog of previous purchases that have been made by the government of India from America. It gives our nation a bad reputation when we cannot provide products that countries like India buy, and we cannot fulfill the orders. And Biden administration failed to provide India the engines that India had already bought. So
Crystal blades, yeah.
Yeah, and I think President Trump will act on that and first fulfill those requirements, and then I think the future deals will happen. Now, when it comes to armored personnel carriers, I am no expert on defense, but I do realize that the strikers, which I think were on the table, didn't do that well in the desert conditions and also in the mountainous conditions. So, I mean, most of India's conflict zones are either in the desert or in the mountains. So I don't know how strikers will do in that segment. But again, as I'm not an expert on defense, I can only go by what I read. So those are some of the things that India and America have to figure out. But there are some very easy things where the two can work together. One of them is production of jet engines for the 5th generation aircraft. America has the technology. It has the best technology in the world. We can offer that to India, do joint production, bring them up one generation. They can buy that from us, and then they can work together to produce the next generation, or maybe the 5.5 generation of multi-role stealth aircraft that will be the next version of F-35, because the F-35 really is not doing that well. It's a high maintenance, high cost fighter plane that has seen too many accidents happen in too short a period of time. So, and that's just based on what I can see in the news. So I think we need to really work together on that, and 6 months down the road, we can see what the outcomes of that will be.
Thank you so much, Utsav. We have a few questions for both of you gentlemen, Se Hoon and Utsav. If you could, we could just a couple of questions, if you don't mind. Let's take the first question, please. Chelsea, thank you so much. President 47, that is Trump, in conviction towards action is very similar to Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, only they differ in oratory, rest history, you know. Your thoughts?
I mean, in terms of action, I think Lal Bahadur Shastri ji was a socialist primarily. President Trump is as far away from socialist as you can get. Lal Bahadur Shastri was a very decisive person, despite his short stature and his very terse oration. That way, I think they are similar. Lal Bahadur Shastri and President Trump both are very decisive people. They act upon their words, and they make sure that they are, they are at the cutting edge of their actions. So that I can see the similarities. But in terms of ideologies, I think the two are far apart. And Lal Bahadur Shastri was a simple man who drove a simple car and lived a very simple life, austere life. President Trump's bedroom looks like a Persian palace. So I think in terms of their tastes and their aesthetics, I would encourage Chelsea to go and see a room in the Trump Tower or in Mar-a-Lago, and they will see the difference.
Thank you so much. Next question from Maithili. Utsav ji, was there any discussion on H-1B visa in Modi-Trump meeting? Se Hoon, you were there. Was there any discussion on this?
Unfortunately, I didn't hear anything. If immigration was discussed, it was really about illegal immigration, where both leaders have commented that illegal immigration is wrong and that it shouldn't happen. So unfortunately, no, there was no discussion on the H-1B issue.
Well, wonderful having both of you gentlemen. And there's one more question from Chelsea. I support Trump to impose tariffs on India for supporting these nepotism entrenched businesses. Do nothing, no R&D, no manufacturing. What is the catalyst of change? I'll leave this question to both of you. Se Hoon, you first.
Well, in terms of the tariffs, I think I've already made it clear that it could have been interpreted as a power move by President Trump, but in my view, and probably in the views of a lot of my colleagues, it was to set a leveling field for both countries to build at least an area of trust where they can go back in order to carry on any type of trade from this moment on. And again, this is important because U.S.-India relations isn't just U.S.-India relations. It really means a lot for world security, the world's economy, and the trajectory as to which direction our world will go. Are we going to go towards more of a polarizing route where, like under the Biden administration, we always try with our contacts, like vis-a-vis Soros, to get everyone under our feet, and get them to basically do whatever our paymasters tell them to do? Or are we going to have a world where we can at least mutually respect each other and build up an environment where everyone can prosper together in that sense? So, and really recognize the problems and the strengths that comes on both sides. And so I feel like at least at the moment, that's how we should look at it. And in terms of the tariffs, look, President Trump has made it clear since from his campaign days that this is coming, and but despite that, they had a phenomenal conversation today. As somebody who was there, judging by the in-person facial expression, both were entirely satisfied with the outcome. And by the way, there was an after briefing with the ambassador and I think the foreign secretary. They pretty much said the same thing. This was an extremely productive meeting together, and they've listed out all the accomplishments and the discussion points that occurred between the two leaders, and which Bangladesh one of them as well. And so from what we can see, it's going towards a good trajectory for both US and India.
Thank you so much, Se Hoon. And Utsav, your question to you, tariffs. Can you put that question back, please? Yeah. So tariffs was an inevitability. I think India is quite prepared for it. Your thoughts on this? Because One thing that I find wanting is R&D, unwillingness of the Indian companies to spend on R&D. She has a point. 𝗟𝗏𝗍 has a point in that. Something has to change. First of all, the Indian companies need to come and start setting up shop in the United States. And when they have done it, they have had a lot of lawsuits placed against them. I'm not mincing words here. And we all know which companies I'm talking about. Somehow they don't seem to know how to run their business in the United States. And I find that very strange because these are very competent people who are doing that. Your thoughts on this? I think it's a very valid question. What are your thoughts on this?
I agree to some extent that there is a culture of lack of R&D in India. It's a culture that developed over the last 70 years. And it's a culture of minimalism. Do the minimum to get the maximum profit. And,
Correct.
That has seeped into generations. So since it started in 1950s, and it has come through, so many, at least 3 generations. So it is very hard to change it over 10 years or 15 years. So that is number one. Number two, there needs to be more funding of R&D in India. And when I say funding, there needs to be the willingness to lose money. See, the thing is that once you are so, you put yourself on so tight schedule that you're maximizing your profit margin by doing the minimum amount of work, you really do not have time for research or resources for research, because research involves wasting money. And China did that. Spent years and years. There was a time when China would buy civilian aircrafts from the West and reverse engineer their products to manufacture and transition into military aircrafts. That's how China actually, they did everything possible to improve their R&D. And today they are reaping the benefits of that. I'm not saying India needs to become like China. What I'm saying is that India needs to allocate more resources so that it generates a new philosophy, a new way of doing research. And one benefit that India has now is that it has a huge workforce, a global workforce that has worked. You have the Googles and the Microsofts and you name it. Indians are there at the topmost positions. India needs to figure out a way to utilize their skill sets and bring them back to India and set up the required infrastructure to get things done. That involves money, that involves risk. But India is probably ready to do that right now.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. That was a wonderful conversation. And viewers, please show us your inputs by way of comments. We'll be happy to respond to them. Se Hoon always is very proactive in these things, and so is Utsav. And I do my best to answer your questions. So please do give us your comments on this program. We would love to have both of you gentlemen back maybe in a couple of weeks' time or 4 weeks' time, when things are going to be getting a little bit more shape. Basically, I'm talking about Bangladesh, even Pakistan border, and so on and so forth. Thank you once again. Wonderful. It's late in night for you guys. Thank you so much once again. Namaskar.
Namaste.